We had
were
a. Go ahead, Riley.
sorry, Trent. I'm like talking first just out of habit. That's just how we've been
Yeah,
in
go
it so
for it.
far. Okay, yeah. Actually, Trent, why don't you take it?
All right.
Hello and welcome to The Great Game, an Australian Megagame podcast. I'm Jack and I'm here as always with my good friend Pat, and today we got to speak with Riley and Trenton of the Megagame Coalition. It's a group that's all about North American mega games, spanning most of North America, and it brings mega games to every corner of the country. But specifically, this episode, we are talking about conventions like GenCon, which the coalition has a huge focus on, and where they really go nuts every year, it sounds like.
Yeah, this year in particular, when they were able to bring 17 games to Gen Con over 3 days, for anyone who's counting, that is over 5 games a day. So it was a pretty serious effort, kind of the craziness that's unheard of elsewhere in the mega game scene. So I think it was quite a good time for us to connect with the coalition and hear about how they do all this stuff. The conversation really connects back to a message that we got a little while ago from Becca as well. So shout out. Becca was asking us about, it would be good to have a conversation on the podcast about running games and mega game like events at these things that are like Gen Con and the UK Games Expo conventions. And I think there's still a full episode worth to discuss here. We probably have only scratched the surface, but hopefully there's still some interesting bits of knowledge and information and ideas in this conversation about how running things at a convention like Gen Con is quite different to those standalone location mega games that we're all quite used to.
Yeah, it was a wonderful conversation, and Riley and Trenton are both so enthusiastic and lovely. It was fantastic. So I'm excited for you to listen to it. But quick announcements. In November, Sydney Mega Games will be run, so say we all. Tickets haven't gone out yet, but they will go out soon. So definitely check out the Sydney Mega Gamers website or Discord to keep up to date if you want to get those tickets, because they often go really fast. And in November in Brisbane, I will be doing a public playtest of my new mega game, Neverwood, which is a interesting. It's a game about intrigue and hidden roles and secrets that really focuses on narrative, and it's about exploring a mysterious wood with various mysterious fairy tale creatures and things going on. So if you're interested in that type of mega game, please check us out, and we'll release more details closer to the date. And finally, my video game, The Thief, the Toad, the Witch, and the Mushroom, is participating in Steam Screamfest this Halloween. So I'll be doing a live stream of the game to celebrate its coming out then in October. So if you're interested, please check out the store page, and there'll be more details closer to the day.
Excellent. And we will have links to all of that information in the notes below. Finally, stay tuned to the great game over the next few weeks. As speaking of Gen Con, which you'll hear about a little bit in this episode, we had a special correspondent and recurring guest, Tony, from the Dukes of Highland, who was good enough to go along to Gen Con and chat to a bunch of people there about their games and the whole con experience. So we've compiled some of those conversations into a few bonus episodes, and they will be out pretty soon, so keep an eye out.
Fantastic. And with that, let's go on to the show.
So Trenton, Riley, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Is that right? This morning?
Yep.
Welcome.
This wonderful Friday evening. Nothing I would rather be doing. Let's do it. Let's talk mega games.
Mega Game
Yeah.
Friday.
Yay!
Thank you for joining us, Trenton. Some of the listeners might remember you from the last time we had a chat about Deep Haven, and Riley, new character on the pod. Both of you from lots of places, but also from the Mega Game Coalition. Did you just want to quickly introduce yourselves and run us through who you are in the Mega Game world and how you came to be sitting here tonight?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My name is Riley Nixon. I've been in the Megagame community a long time. I currently have the dubious honor of being the longest serving member of the Megagame Council, which is kind of the head organization that we have for the kind of the umbrella organization that is most famous for running the Mega Games at GenCon every year. Yeah, and so me and Trenton met when we were both in Minnesota, and we were running games out of there for a bit. And I've since moved to Philly and have started Philly Mega Games, and we have 7 games planned for the fall. So it's getting wild over here in Philly.
Wow, that's huge.
And that's a lot
Yeah.
on top of what you've just done, which we'll get into. But double digits earlier in the year, so a lot of games happening under the coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Trenton?
Yeah, thank you for having me back, Click and Clack. It's great to be here again.
The name never stuck. I'm sorry.
We'll make it happen. So I'm Trenton Greyoak. I am of the shut up and sit down generation. It took me a couple of years to be able to play in a mini game, but I ended up flying before I moved to Minnesota. I ended up flying to Minnesota to play and watch the skies out there. That happened to be Riley's game that she was running, and I had not known her before that, and kind of started. I think I
flew
messaged
out there.
Yeah, it was before we moved there, and I'm like, Deanna is from Minnesota, my wife, so we flew out there because I really wanted to play.
I didn't know that part. I hope you had a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was great. Yep. And then I think I reached out to Riley a little bit while later, and just started helping her with some of her stuff, and ended up going to GenCon for the first time. And after that, I was like volunteering with Megagame Coalition, and I've mostly been a part of it since then, although I took a little break there for reasons. But yeah. I also made Deep Haven and Grimville Ventures, and Riley made a whole lot of games, none of which are available, I think.
No, they're not. Most of them are not. I don't design for the masses. I design for me.
So
If I had ever designed, in my opinion, a potentially commercially successful product, you better believe I would have already have published it.
yeah, it's a common sentiment, I think, amongst the designers. What kind of things have you designed in the comfort of your backyard?
Yeah, I think my biggest hits are probably Sickle, which was a mega game based on Scythe, and then more recently, I have a lot of fans from Draft Night, which is actually kind of controversial. But I get people coming up to me every year saying, like, Draft Night is my favorite mega game. Like, when is the next Draft Night? And I'm like, are you sure? Like, I heard a lot of people didn't like that game. So, did either, because it was international, did either you all play in my Draft Night games?
No, I saw them around, but I never got a chance to join.
Yeah, so I guess I'll throw a teaser out there. There might be another season of Draft Night in winter of 2025. Temporary, preliminary plans are in the works. So I recommend, international listeners out there, if you're a fan of sports ball, Draft Night is a fictional fantasy draft of a fanciful sci-fi sport. So it's Blurn's Ball, the mega game, or what was that? Blaze Ball? Very Blaze Ball-y.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember hearing about it, but we didn't. I don't think anyone in our crowd played. We did play in the Owl League during the COVID years. Were you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I helped Stefan run that one.
Yeah, okay,
cool.
That's what
awesome.
I thought.
That was a wild experience. I cannot handle 20. Sorry, this is not what we want to talk about, so I'll keep it very brief. But if you have an online mega game that spans time zones, there's no ever real start or stop, and the game just goes on and on and on. I'm sure you talked about this with other people, and that is so draining. It's so exhausting. I mean, it's so thrilling,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like drinking juice just constantly, and you can't stop.
It's absolutely true. Yeah, I think you and Stefan did an amazing job running the game, but I think we did talk about it a little in the episode, is that as Australians, feels like we are kind of waking up after everyone else has kind of done their stuff, or like, time zone
Yeah,
wise.
for
It's like
sure.
we're trying to stay up late so we can be a part of things. It's just a tough format.
Hmm.
I'm glad that we have shifted more to in-person stuff.
Yeah, and I gotta hold on. I gotta stress one thing real quick before we move on. Is that was all Stefan. I barely helped at all. I oftentimes hindered. Like it was all Stefan. Stefan did a great job. So I'm just gonna put that out there in the universe, and whoever now you know, and if you know, you know.
The record is stated. Yep.
Yes. Hmm.
But let's talk about the Megagame Coalition. Yeah, what is the Megagame Coalition? How does it work? What's the deal?
Yeah, so we are an all-volunteer organization, and because it's an umbrella group, we are a group of groups. So most of the people coming to the coalition to volunteer to be part of the council, which is kind of like, I mean, there's only two tiers. It's like everyone else, and then you can be a council member. And the council members, all the authority of that is like fairly informal. There's not really a whole lot of structure uh, because we are an umbrella group of smaller groups that are oftentimes charismatically led. Usually it's just, and I mean that in like a technical definition. I don't mean that as a value judgment. Um, Oftentimes it's just a bunch of very passionate individuals coming together to just run GenCon games. And then if we have the bandwidth, we'll like stretch out to other initiatives to help kind of the mega game community at large in North America.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
something I noticed. Just sorry, Jack. But that was something I noticed just looking at the Discord this morning. The coalition, in my mind, has always been sort of a big, formal structure, I suppose, with leaders like combined leadership and all of the rest, and like this overarching kind of we're coordinating everything that's happening across the country. But then I was looking through this morning, and there's just people jumping in there all the time, being like, "Hey, we're a pair of people from this city, and we're going to start a group. How do we start?" And then it just happens. So it seems like you were saying, it is a little bit more informal and organic, even though there's a single sort of brand and sort of identity. Is that how it sort of runs?
Yeah, I mean it's very informal. We don't have a bank account or articles of incorporation. Like we don't have anything. We don't have any sort of structure at all. I don't even know Robert's Rules of Order. Like, you know what I mean? That's not how we run. And how well we run can like vary pretty widely from year to year because like people join in or drop out or like people gel or they don't, and we're constantly have an influx of new members every year, so they have to like get like a year, a learning year in before they can really take initiative and confidence on things. Yeah, so this year we actually had a fairly small council. It essentially drilled down to just me, Trenton, Tony, Nicole, and Michelle. Who, if you're in the Megagame community, you probably heard of those names at some point. If you come to GenCon, I'm sure you ran into one or two of them.
Except Michelle, she's a ghost.
Yeah.
Behind the curtain, orchestrating things.
Yep.
We all need one of those.
So how many groups are under the umbrella? How many this year, would you say?
I don't know if I did the math this year. Trent, do you know?
I don't know how many groups. I know how many games we did. We did
Something like 12 groups with 18 games.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sounds about right.
Somewhere around that. Yeah.
Yeah,
massive.
about 900 player, at least 900 slots. We had some repeats for sure, but yeah. I think I counted 6 debuts, like 6 new games.
Wow.
At least from what I know of.
Okay.
And
That's amazing.
like these games, like these gaming groups are diverse within it themselves. Some of them are like self-contained capsule units that just kind of like want to come and operate under our umbrella. And then others are like just enthusiastic individuals who have like their own game, and they like maybe like need a little bit of volunteer moderation support, and yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So, we're all welcome.
Mm.
We're all welcoming. Everyone's welcome at the Megagame Coalition.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
so how long has it been going now, and how would you say it's changed over the years, if in terms of, is it much bigger now than when you started? How does it kind of compare?
Yeah, when I first joined, it was back in, I think, like 2015 or 16, somewhere in that range. Yeah, it was a long time ago. There was only 2 groups in the coalition. So there was a group called Chicago Mega Games and a group called West Coast Mega Games. And both of those groups are defunct or semi-defunct now. So that just gives you an idea of kind of like the turnover that occurs like year to year.
That's I feel like Southwest were the ones who did the big Watch the Skies with that big 3D globe of the world.
Yep.
Is that
That's the one.
I remember that's when the coalition came onto my radar for the first time. And I guess
that globe thing is like not at all like it's not a very good map. You got to walk it around it, but oh my goodness, is it like just such a great set piece?
It ruined everyone
It
else's
looked incredible.
ability to deliver games that met expectations.
We were talking about maybe because Scott, one of the game runners, like he knows where it is, and we've talked about maybe bringing that back at some point.
Yeah, very cool.
Ooh.
Very cool.
There is like a weird phenomenon that I didn't quite identify in hindsight until like recently, is that West Coast Mega Games kept putting on these events where the designs had a really high production value. Like the Sengoku map is this absolutely huge, detailed, ornate map of Japan, and it's absolutely beautiful. And they must have had like great photographers or something, or maybe we just got lucky. We have so many good photos of West Coast Mega Game games that we're like still using and are still up on the website.
Yep.
Like they're not around anymore. So, and now we've moved out of the stadium into hotel rooms, and hotel rooms are just not as photogenic. Yeah.
Like
for those who don't know, in the early years of GenCon, we were based on the stadium floor of Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, which is the football team, the American football team. And it's an incredible looking venue. The sound quality was absolute garbage, and I'm so thankful we left that. But the photos look so great every year.
I think I remember that. Was that where a version of Jack's game ran when it was called Heavy Rain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emperor as Heavy Rain. I remember seeing a video with Matt from the Mega Game Assembly who went over there to play that year, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Megagame. Yeah, he right? Is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. I just know him as Mr. Megagame.
Yeah. He has a name, Trenton.
Oh, okay. It seemed like he changed his name to that, but yeah. He played in Deep Haven. That was 2019. And the funny thing about the stadium is, like, we were talking about this at GenCon. Like, I have a little bit of nostalgia for the stadium, and Riley thinks I'm insane.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Can you meditate on your feelings? Espouse why to the listeners?
Yeah. So we were I think we were probably the only group, or one of the only groups, that had, a mic and speakers there. And so a lot of times when we would do announcements, like sometimes like a hush would fall over the entire stadium where all these other people are playing different board games and war games and that kind of thing. And they'd all kind of turn their heads and look what was happening. I remember with Deep Haven in particular, whenever the giant Jenga tower would fall, not only would it crash to the ground, but everyone in the game would go, "Oh!" And then the entire stadium would just look over at us.
That's free.
Otherwise, it was Otherwise, it was a terrible location.
Yeah, that's fair. That really is a testament. What we're talking about with that venue, and also the the West Coast, or what were they called? Sorry, Southwest.
West Coast Mega Games.
West Coast, yes. Sorry, I'm thinking of another UK group, I think. So yeah, that venue, the big Watch the Skies globe, all of those historic things from the early days. The coalition has moved on plenty, but and that group isn't even functioning anymore, and yet the coalition is still the same thing, and it's growing and moving, and that's like a real testament to the purpose of like having a union, I suppose, over the top of everything, which is pretty cool. Because I didn't realize that the coalition existed under its name back then.
Yeah, I honestly I think Riley gets like almost all the credit for keeping it going, especially like pre-COVID. Like she really took the reins, and she had help, but like she put in like a ton of the work to get it going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm not 100% sure about that. But
No,
I will.
It's on the record now.
I will take massive credit. Shout out to Noah Allington. We were the only two people to keep the coalition going like throughout some of the years of the pandemic. So just us two.
Yeah. Okay. So from small things, and now from that grows this year, where you've got 7 mega games lined up between now and the end of the year, and you've just run was it 17 at GenCon?
18.
18.
Yeah.
So it's it's come a long way, I suppose. Just to understate it.
Yeah, I think we were really like growing a lot back in 2019, and like we had even bigger plans for 2020. Obviously that didn't work out, but I think it was a big reset button. I mean, that's when I kind of stepped away for a couple of years there, and then
you keep saying for reasons. I mean, COVID is a pretty good reason.
Yeah.
There was one reason, Trenton, and it was a massive global pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you think of a worse event to play? Worse type of event?
Yeah, I feel like it.
But then we've been growing again, so it's
that's really good. I'm glad. It's really good to see all the old classics grow back out of that, because I know some didn't resurrect afterwards, and I know even here, for example, we're back and up and running, but a lot of the crowd, like the audience, has gone. Not necessarily just from COVID, but over that break, the momentum was lost, and they've moved on to other things, or they've moved elsewhere. But it's really good to see, regardless, that we're all back on track and everything is sort of as active as it ever was.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the ideal. I mean, we'll see if I have to cancel any of these events.
Yeah. Best
so,
plans.
fingers crossed for ticket sales.
Yeah.
So, just one quick note. I mean, since we're talking about kind of starting fresh and stuff like that, so this year is the first year that Megagame Coalition will be operating in some capacity at PAX Unplugged, which is a convention here in Philly. And me and Trenton are both going to be at that. And so we're kind of setting ourselves up to be right back to square one again, where we're going to have to figure out how to run a brand new con. So
yeah, right.
So,
yeah. Well,
thanks for signing on, buddy. I love you, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
At least you've got plenty of practice. Should be fine. Before we dig more into the con stuff and the games that you've been running, could you give us a bit of a rundown on how the coalition functions? Because you've kind of described it as this big umbrella group. It doesn't have any formality as far as having a bank account or anything like that, but it's an organizational umbrella. So separating it from the individual groups who are going and running events and that kind of thing, how does the coalition itself run, and how has it succeeded in growing the way it has?
I mean, it really doesn't. Trent, you're gonna have to supplement my answer here. It really doesn't run in any sort of formal capacity. I can't stress that enough. Essentially, we start meeting monthly, closer to GenCon deadlines in order to meet GenCon deadlines, and then we kind of just continue to barely meet GenCon deadlines as they come. And in terms of how we do that, it changes every year based on the makeup of the council. So this last year, Michelle and Tony are both fairly, or I guess more Michelle is, and the rest of us took a fairly formal approach, where we really viewed all the game applications in a standardized manner and really did a bunch of things, and obviously, like any sort of bureaucratic organization, things can get messy, but in as standard a way as we possibly can. But there was no formal structure or outlines on how to do that previously for the most part.
Yeah, I think so there's the council, which is just volunteers that are going to volunteer the whole whole year, and we make a lot of the big decisions, with input from the other game runners and other volunteers, and I wanted to touch a little bit on GenCon like dates because they're kind of insane. Like we basically have to submit our events in January. GenCon is in August. Yeah, so that's an ordeal. It's hard to plan that far ahead.
Yeah, I have to for PAX. I guess this is not uncommon for big conventions. For PAX, the deadline is September 2nd for event submissions, and the convention is not till December 6th. So,
well,
yeah,
okay.
and I already have a floor plan worked out for PAX, and yeah.
It's a significant job, and it sounds like it's mostly like, would it be fair to say that a lot of the need of having the coalition's organization over the top of everything is the cons?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of our our mission statement is to help the US megagaming scene as a whole. But that's kind of really hard to do it's really hard to conceptualize what to do in that manner. The other part of our mission statement is to run events at GenCon, and other conventions. So we view, aspirationally, we are an umbrella organization that benevolently uplifts all of the North American megagaming community. But in reality, we're an informal group of planners who all come together to plan mega games at cons and to share resources. So our value add to not only the kind of the mega game players in North America, but kind of game runners is we can handle and share a lot of the logistical loads of planning and materials in order to solicit more mega games as a whole. Yeah.
And that shared resources is like knowledge, it's planning methodology, it's games and their components, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, mega games at GenCon have a reputation.
Right.
And so
what
we have. Well, I like to think it's positive.
Oh no.
And it got a little complicated this year because we actually our administrative contact with GenCon actually switched to a different person who knows a lot less about mega games. But previously we had built up a lot of trust and had secured buy-in from the GenCon administration to provide us various subsidies and various banners. So for the most part, that main subsidy comes in just making sure that we have a dedicated space for the entire convention, which is a huge benefit. A lot of, if you just randomly submit an event if you just randomly submit a mega game event, there is a chance that they'll put you in a completely unsuitable location, or you just won't get selected for approval within the GenCon system. And none of that is sinister or anything. It's just the fact that they're an absolutely huge convention with very diverse events, and just because we handle a lot of the vetting for the events, we can submit all our events together as a block, and then for the most part, they end up rubber stamping it. Although year to year, things can change radically and be difficult. I mean, when it comes down to it, they are the huge corporate, commercial, capitalist organization, and we are just a bunch of amateurs. So we are at their whims. But there's two sides to every coin, and on the other side, we're a cool part of their con, and people sign up just to come to mega games.
Yeah, we sell out every year so far. Within, we went way up, and we still sold out within an hour, and most of the games were within minutes. So there's a hunger for these games at GenCon. I mean, GenCon is 70,000 plus people and growing every year. So it's there's a lot of, even a tiny percentage of that are hungry for mega games is a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
I I wanted to bring it back to like the mission statement, like about the continuing to grow Megagame presence. Like honestly, like GenCon is actually one of the best ways to make new groups pop up. You know, it's like people come and they see how awesome it is, like either by volunteering or playing, and they become more active in our community, and they make connections of like, oh hey, you're in this state here, or that you're an hour drive, like we should start a new organization out here. And that, I think that's like, I've definitely seen some activity, especially after this Gen Con, of new groups like like really excited coming out of Gen Con to like possibly run games themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I don't think we have that per se, because we've got a very large area that we need to run games for, I suppose, in Australia. But all of our cities are kind of managed by their own group. And so anyone who comes to one in Sydney, for example, isn't going to, they often walk away and say, this was amazing, I want to go and create my own mega game now. But they don't usually have any need to step away and be like, well, I'm going to go and create like the South Sydney community, or the Blue Mountains community, or whatever, because I don't think the audience is large enough, but also the city is done. Like we've got a group and we do it. So that's
Right.
interesting. You have a lot more tendrils shooting out, and a lot more population in general, I suppose, to go and accommodate, which is where a big umbrella group comes in handy, because otherwise people would walk away and be like, I want to start that, and then they wouldn't know what to do, or who to talk to, or how to start.
Yeah, and I honestly think that if we didn't exist and do Gen Con, like, you'd have groups still doing stuff, but it just wouldn't, you wouldn't have as many new groups like popping up, or people like, because at the very least you can come to Gen Con and you can do mega games. Like if if you live somewhere that can't support a mega game organization, at least you have Gen Con. And I think a lot of our players, judging by their enthusiasm, that sign up for as many as they can there. There's a joke that like a lot of us like only go to Gen Con for mega games, and like we rarely see anything else at Gen Con. And it seems like that's pretty common for a lot of us.
Yeah. That's interesting, because that's here I think we have steered away from some conventions. At least in the Sydney group, we've talked about it a lot. And we've steered away because a lot of feedback from those crowds who already go to, say, board game conventions or that kind of thing, is that they don't want to go and spend their entire day doing one thing. So they, it's not the place for the mega game for them. But it sounds like you've got a crowd who only learned about mega games through the con, and that maybe that has made it more palatable, I suppose, to go there just for that.
That is kind of feedback that I hear fairly often, is like something equivalent to, I don't want to spend my entire day doing that. There's a couple caveats to that. One is that at these gaming conventions, like a lot of events just are inherently long. Like a board game demo is often like an hour plus long. Like an RPG session can go 2, 3, 4 hours, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're already like fairly limited in what you can actually accomplish in a day. The other thing is that, for con pressures, it really pays to just run a shorter mega game. Like that's totally possible. We've done it before. We'll do it again. I think a great mega game length in terms of a convention is 4 hours.
I mean, I think it's a different feel. Like it seems like we've kind of settled on 6 hours as the standard for most games at Gen Con, which I think is shorter than a lot of like more local runs of games. Sometimes it doesn't feel like enough, like especially in terms of like the debrief and like hanging out and telling the stories. I feel like we always run out of time for that. But yeah, I do think there's room. I mean, a mega game doesn't have to take the whole day. You can get some of the same feel and interesting things that happen in a shorter amount of time. And I think there's a lot of. I mean, I agree for the most part, right? Like I think there's a lot to explore for something like 4 hours.
Yep, no, that's fair.
That makes sense. Are there any other? I know in Shucks they talked about this generational mega game they ran, which was specifically designed for the convention, where groups would swap in and out essentially, so that each group is only playing for an hour. Have you experimented with any of that type of thing, or mega games that you think like this design would only work at a con?
Absolutely. That was Heirs of a Shattered Age, and I was one of the control for that. I can't remember if Riley, if were you controlling for that too? You were there, obviously.
I believe I was control as well. Yeah. It went not great.
Yeah.
I mean, from a player perspective, it's one of those things where the players had fun, or like most of them, anyways.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I didn't get the vibe that it was an actual mega game. It felt just like a series of large board games. So there wasn't a lot of emergent gameplay
or party games.
A series
it
of
was
large
a lot of very stitched
games
together. Yeah. It had some cool ideas. The generational thing. I mean, it's something we've talked a lot about. Like I definitely want to do something like that someday. But I do think, I mean, that was the first run of it. It was very ambitious. So I think they had, they had to take some shortcuts just to get it, to play. But yeah, I would have liked to see more development on it.
I think me or Trenton may just be like, connoisseurs and like with heightened senses. The players had a blast, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I'd say most of them did.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
To kind of get back to your question though, like there's always like in the hangouts, especially at GenCon, like after everyone's exhausted, go to the bar. Like there's always, crazy ideas of like, what if we did 2 mega games in parallel and they didn't know about each other, but they were actually connected, and we do the reveal and yeah, the generational stuff comes up a lot. When I'm most ambitious, which I think this last Gen Con has taught me to be less ambitious. I want to go for the record at some point. You know, like Gen Con would be the place to break the world record for as many players playing a mega game together. But I'm not going to do that anytime.
Could be the mega game.
Yep. Exactly.
Trent, do you think it'd be a Watch the Skies variant, or do you think it'd be something else?
Oh, come on.
It's got to be something that scales better. Like, because like the amount of control, like moderators you would need would be its own mega game, right? Like to get up to those numbers. But yeah,
I mean, if the UK can do it,
right.
What was our founding aspiration as Americans to do it better than them?
Right.
Oh, shit.
All right.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah.
That's what I learned in the American education system, anyways.
Yeah. Sorry, just before we move on, because I think we need to dig into some of the con stuff a little bit more. But you talked about your mission statement. So on the website it says to sustainably grow mega games in North America. Do you have any? You've talked a little bit about how to do that, and Gen Con is a big factor, and the way that you share resources and sort of help new groups. Do you have any goals other than talking about having a massive a world record breaking a player count? Do you have any goals for the next few years that you're aiming towards, or is it always just sort of take it as it comes?
Because we're such like a kind of an anarchic group, like the goals of the coalition. I mean, the mission state is great at focusing us, but generally the goals of the coalition kind of morph to the desires and the capabilities of the individuals involved.
Yep.
So, So I know a goal for Tony, which I think is a great goal, an admirable goal, a goal that I am definitely not actively contributing to, is to have more published games that you can purchase off the shelf.
Yeah.
And which is great because now we have Touched by Darkness by Ben Canelos, which is going to be a phenomenal published game. I mean, I think it's technically already published because you can get it off GameCrafter, but he's seeking like professional production for it, which would be awesome and amazing. Yeah, and it'd be great. I mean, I'm sure y'all have heard of or played Den of Wolves. Touched by Darkness is obviously very similar. And it already looks great. It already plays great. We ran it at Gen Con. I'm super excited.
Yeah, that would be really cool get a glimpse of. I actually hadn't heard about that one, and it would be the. I mean, we've got an Australian grown one as well. That is So Say We All, which is running again later this year, I think. So be keen to compare the three when that is in a publishable state, because it's such a good subject matter / theming to mine for a mega game.
Well, funny enough, like Touched by Darkness is actually a fantasy version of
nice.
Ten of
Okay.
Wolves. Yeah, so it has some interesting
Can
theming.
Can I highlight a fun mechanical difference in Den of Wolves and Touched by Darkness? I'm sure the viewers might be interested. So in Den of Wolves, you have the best mega game mechanic of all time, which is the jump mechanic.
Jump.
Jump. So good, phenomenal. Actually, that is an example of something that worked better in the stadium, because you had to shout because the din of the stadium was already.
See, now you're getting nostalgic.
Loud. Yeah, you really had to wail. So in the new Touched by Darkness variant, and apologies if I'm using those terminologies correctly, this is its own game. John Meisen is not associated with it at all. In the Touched by Darkness game, instead of jumping, you have rituals, which instead of like raising a sign and shouting jump, you just start chanting. And you can chant whatever. It doesn't have to be anything. So like it can be radically different from game to game. So I heard one of the games at GenCon, they to inspire their chants, they brought a copy of Good Night Moon, the children's book, and they just started reading it when they wanted to chant.
Wow,
yeah, which is
very
great.
Cool. It feels like something that could potentially get you in trouble at GenCon, depending on the chants. But yeah, maybe anywhere.
People at GenCon know. We would nip it in the bud if anything was happening.
Yeah, of course. That sounds very cool.
So
obviously,
back to goals, right? Did we actually answer that? Yeah. What goals do we have, Riley?
Oh, geez. Okay. So I mean, I can only say my personal goal, which is to have operations up and down the Northeast Amtrak corridor of the United States. So I'm based out of Philly, and there's a couple other designers based around New York City in the north, and also a small operation down in Richmond, Virginia. And this is the most densely populated part of the U.S. You can drive or take a train or fly between these cities relatively easily. I think it's a prime chain of locations that can really form a foundation for an interconnected megagame community. Yeah. And so obviously the scope is not national. But, if we did have a series of megagame groups up and down the East Coast, it would potentially have a GenCon-like effect, where you would get, it would start spreading like a virus. And you'd have more locus points to gather around.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. In terms of goals that I would have for MGC is I would love to actually get more international like ideas coming in. Like, we definitely run games from, UK and Australia, elsewhere. But I would love to get like more people flying out and running a game. Like one thing I'm pushing for is like it's in the early stages, but I'm hoping that I can convince people to do like some sort of travel stipend like every year, like try to find a game runner from another country that has designed their game and try to just help them come out and run a game at GenCon. I think that would be so good for like the community over here to have a little bit more cross pollination.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Amazing. I have someone who said that very thing to me like 2 days ago, so I will get you in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
cool. Yeah, I mean, me and Trenton, we have a lot of special memories from when that UK group flew out.
Yeah.
And like we didn't, to be honest, we did not interact with them a ton. We probably could have interacted with them more, but for the most part,
I
they were
definitely,
just playing in games that we were moderating in.
yeah, yep, yeah. I think I definitely remember Mr. Megagame in Deep Haven, like some of his insane schemes, or excuse
Yeah.
me, his wizard wheezes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to like I don't mean to like self-aggrandize our contribution or whatever, but I have noticed a shift in the UK design scene, kind of like away from the kind of wargaming roots
Mhm.
and into kind of the more LARPy and board gamey realm, which in the US, like that was our starting position. Like none of us were natural war gamers or like hardcore historians besides me. But like, and so it was great to have that cross pollination. I wonder if any of the things they witnessed in any US games actually made it back to the UK, because like, I mean, I have to imagine that. I can only speculate, but just due to the design pedigree and the effective networks, agglomeration and stuff like that, there's no way that the like US designed mega game is as good as the average UK designed mega game. And I don't mean that like in a mean way. I mean that like in a just a kind of an economic statistical way.
Mm.
So
Not everyone would agree with that.
I feel like I've seen that shift as well, and I feel like part of it is, they've just been doing these things for so much longer than us. All of us who came out of that shut up, sit down generation, as you called it, Trenton. There's so much more history before then, and so I think that crowd was already a bit, when Watch the Skies came along, that was vanilla, done and dusted kind of. Bare minimum basic kind of mega game idea for them, for a lot of that crowd, I suppose. Whereas for everyone else who was seeing it for the first time, it was like this revelation in what could be. So it is interesting to watch those trends, though. I think that we're following their trend a little bit here in Australia, but I'm kicking and screaming against it because I want to go back to I want to make some more wargaming things, which I'm going to, but I think we're
bless
also
your heart.
I do feel like we are a bit lucky here, where I think the designers, the few people in the design space overthink it a little bit, and the people in the playing space will play anything. We're still at that honeymoon stage, so you put a game on and it'll sell, which is a lucky place to be because it gives us some freedom. We don't have to steer into a certain theme or genre. But it is funny to see, and it would be interesting if you could sort of pinpoint some of the inspirations or the cross pollination that's happened over since the coalition has been thriving. Definitely, I would love to come and play a game over in your patch as well as in the UK, because I feel like they have to run differently. They have to be culturally different in some way. So it'd be really good to just experience it sometime.
Absolutely, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'd be happy to have you. That's for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So it seems like cons are a huge focus of things in America, which is very different to Australia, where we really don't do any of that kind of thing at all. So what would you say is kind of the proportion of games that are being run at cons in America versus games that would just be outside of that and a standalone mega game? Do you think most of the scene is kind of focused around conventions, and has that always been the case? If that's the way it's working, you think?
You get into a little bit of an issue of like what is a mega game, right? But yeah, I just like off the cuff, very broad guess. I'd say like maybe half of all the mega games occur at a convention. Is that Trent? You got a thought?
Yeah, I think especially after, post COVID, like I think a vast majority of them are probably at GenCon. I mean, you see more active groups starting again. Like Tony's group in Louisville is like really active, and other ones are kind of starting up. So I see that maybe shifting, hopefully. But currently, I think GenCon is the place to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. And has it kind of been that way from the start of the Megagame Coalition, or do you think it's tilted more that way after COVID? Like it's become more centralized around GenCon?
It's tough. We're not a very old organization in the grand scheme of things. And so we had one story and then COVID hit, and then this is just like chapter 2. So it's tough to extrapolate trends. And then on top of that, like there's kind of this background phenomenon where pretty much every Megagame group that has ever operated and will ever operate in the context of North America that I'm aware of is either either boils down to 1 or 2 passionate people or like a small group of really passionate friends. And so oftentimes those groups only operate as long as whoever the most active people feel like it. And so we are kind of, unless something changes and we magically become systematized, which I kind of don't see happening, we will forever be, a nation of random groups popping up wherever and going for a couple of years and then maybe dropping off again. Maybe that'll change. Maybe Tony's group has legs. There's a group down in Dallas that's been going for years. I'm starting out strong in Philly, so we'll see how long that goes. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it is. I mean, yeah, we've got a few long-standing groups in Australia, but I think it definitely feels the same way, especially when a group is starting out. You need like one person, maybe 2 people who are just really passionate and kind of pushing things forward for things to get off the ground. And it makes sense that in a country that's so spread out that it would be really tough to get like cross-pollination going and tough to get your group to a sustainable level. That it's just running for years.
It feels here too, the trend has been, we try to, when we first start, the groups are piggybacking on some other entity that already exists. I'm not sure if that was necessarily the case for you actually, Jack. In Brisbane, I feel like you started right from the ground. With us in Sydney, we definitely relied heavily on a university crowd for the first couple of games as the audience grew. The same is happening in Adelaide now. Whereas I guess the difference is with the coalition being set up, when new groups start in your neck of the woods, the pre-existing group that they can piggyback on is another Megagame group, which is a huge advantage. So it feels like your growth can be exponential, basically, based on people being interested in doing it and people wanting to put the effort in and leading the little groups. The world's your oyster, it seems.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Talk to me again in a year and a half, and we'll see.
Okay, all right, that's a deal.
I will say, just as an example of that piggybacking, I'll be meeting this weekend to discuss transporting Dena Wolf materials down to Richmond to run a game down there with a new group down there. So that's a great example of something that we can do as individuals to kind of to what's the inverse of piggybacking, where you allow to be piggybacked? I'm afraid I don't know.
You're the pig, I guess.
You're a back pig?
Oh, you're a pig. Well, I don't want to go and say that. Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll throw that to the listeners. What is the opposite of a piggyback? So, GenCon for 2024, it's just passed. You did 18 different events there. Did you want to just talk us through how that comes to be? How do you go from knowing that GenCon's coming to being there at the con and orchestrating 18 different events across all your different groups? Walk us through how all that happens.
So we put out a call for game applications. So anyone who has a game design that they want to run at GenCon can apply with us. And once we get all the applications, and it's not a one-dimensional application process. Frequently, we're responding and asking questions. And then kind of at the end of that process, we vet all the applications to double make sure that the design is appropriate, that we think it's of a certain level of quality, that we think the designer is capable of pulling it off, et cetera, et cetera. And how we do that varies from year to year. This year we did a kind of a more intense deep dive than we have in previous years, and it works. It works well. So after we have all the games that we want to run, we make a prospective schedule, and we submit all that information to GenCon. We work with GenCon to finalize a floor plan, the location of all our events, and kind of finalize the specifics of our schedule. So an issue this year is we actually had our schedule changed like maybe 6 weeks before GenCon. I can't remember the exact date, but it was really close. Essentially, what was happening is our old space at our previous hotel room had been bought out by a commercial entity. I think it was Magpie Games.
Wow.
Is that right, Trenton?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where, like, hey, out of curiosity, how much would we have to pay to obtain our space back, which we were previously getting for free? And they were like, oh, it'd be on the order of tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So
Wow.
obviously that's off the table for us, because we're just a bunch of amateurs. So we had to scramble and shift all our stuff around. We eventually found another hotel location that we were able to fit our space, that we put a full track of games in, which we call it a track. I don't know if I need to elaborate on that. It's just a track refers to a specific location that runs mega games like from start to finish. So we had one full track of mega games, and then the other mega games that we had kind of got bumped to two other semi-random locations that we were able to identify and negotiate with GenCon. So those being part of the stadium and then part of Union Station, which is an old kind of ornate train station. Yeah, and I can talk about. Let's Trent. Do you want to hop in here?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a process that we've refined and changed and tweaked, and I'm sure this time will be slightly different from last time. But really, like I mentioned earlier, like we're kind of at the whim of what the deadlines are for GenCon, and because GenCon is so huge, those deadlines are like very far in advance, to the point where like probably in the next month we're gonna have to start setting dates of like submissions, for next year. And so it takes a lot of pre-planning, a lot of coordinating. There's kind of like slow times of the year, and then really like the whole council has to be like doing stuff a lot. And it's all volunteer too. It's like we're not paying ourselves for this. It's all just we're passionate about it.
It's weird. I was talking to so Trent and Tony and I were all at the debrief. Unfortunately, Michelle couldn't make it, or I don't mean to put her on blast, but I think she actually forgot. I got a text from her afterwards saying, "Why didn't you text me?" We were all talking. We have a little bit of a vibe that maybe we potentially. We worked really hard this year, and I don't know if the rate at which we worked hard is completely sustainable for all of us. So we're going to need to work differently or just less hard this upcoming year. Like something's going to have to change.
Very fair. Very fair. And so I think we will have some more GenCon stuff coming up, but how did it go? How do you feel about now that it's passed, how it all went?
I think the best summation that I can provide is that this year is the first year that we've ever run GenCon where there hasn't been a single disaster game.
Hooray!
And so,
awesome.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's everything went pretty dang good at minimum.
Yeah, that's a pretty low bar, but very low bar there, but it was great.
So many mega games and so many people going on. That's an amazing bar to clear.
Yeah, so how many? 18 games. How big were they, player-wise? Were they all in the 50 mark, the 30? How many players were we looking at here?
Yeah, we had a couple smaller ones. Like Pantheon was one of them, which was 30 players, and then they kind of range. I'd say most of them were in the upper 40s. We had several in the 50s and 60s, and then we actually one of the semi like experimental games that we accepted through is it was actually a game called Hearsay, which is actually a mega murder mystery, which is closer to more of like a murder mystery, like semi LARP type thing, except at mega scale. Which that it was actually a discussion. Is like, is this do we allow this through? And I think some of us are a little bit more big tent mega game definition, and other people are more like, no, it has to be this specific thing. But I think it was worth doing, and I mean, from what I understand, it went really well.
Yeah, I think the player count for that was 80. Am I misremembering?
No, that's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 80 people in a giant murder mystery. So yeah, and as a side note, that event I think also had the highest ticket price of any of our events, and it also like sold out no problem. So yeah.
It's almost like we should raise our prices.
maybe Trenton.
Maybe so.
That's
Awesome. Well,
yeah. Sorry, I was
Okay,
just going to say at that scale, I think that is a huge achievement. Then, if there were no disaster games, it's hundreds and hundreds of people coming along, even if there's repeats. So that's impressive. I think like there's no small feat to pull off that many games all at once and have them all be at least good.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is like they were a lot of them were very different. Like it was, there were some that were very mechanical, like almost large board games. There was some that were way more freeform, like Goblin City, that has more DNA with like Sickle or Deep Haven. And then, just a whole lot in between. So it was cool to see kind of the diversity of ideas.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And it was kind of a big con for me and you, Trent, personally. I mean, you premiered Grimvale. I did a first official run of Jungle. I'd done a playtest at a previous GenCon, and that went well. And I also previewed a one-page mega game that I'm working on called Pizza Party, which also went phenomenal. Yeah.
Although Pizza Party was the only time GenCon has required us to add a little note to our description, and that note was note, no actual pizza will be served.
That's good. Very good. Yeah. I like that. I like the thought process they would have gone through sitting in in their office, and they're like, this probably needs a disclaimer. Let's run it up the line.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah.
It had one of those like old school like AIM email smiley faces after the note, and I still think about that. It's so funny.
That's awesome. Very good.
I think we'd better start bringing this conversation to a close. But if there's anyone listening to this and they are interested in joining in for next Gen Con, or if they are interested in forming doing any mega game stuff in America, what would be your number one piece of advice to them, or what should they think about?
Tony asked me something similar when he was interviewing for those 20-minute questions at Gen Con. And the first thing that just popped in my head is, just come to Gen Con. So if you can afford it, definitely just come to Gen Con and just come play, talk, help us moderate. If you have a design you're competent in that's been tested, apply to run it. Gen Con is the locus of our community. Whether we want it to be or not, it is what it is at this point. And it's a beautiful thing. So come and have fun.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So I'll try to go in the other direction. If you can't come to Gen Con, that's okay. Guess what? Every other gaming group, like mega game group, had to start from from a place of nothing, not knowing anything on how to run it. Luckily, we have certain resources. You can come join our server. There's also, Mega Game Assembly. There's great podcasts. Like, there's lots of ways to kind of jumpstart your little community. I think you guys even had a podcast on that, I believe, about mega game communities. So you're not starting from scratch like a lot of the other groups. So yeah, just start doing it. Just do it.
Just do it. I got in trouble for giving that advice, but yep, just do it. A quick bonus question then as well. What advice would you give instead to people who are thinking they want to set up a coalition. They want to set up a group of groups. Say it's here, or we've been talking to some people in South America lately. There's different groups down there. People in the UK. What would be your advice if people were sitting around in their separate groups and they thought maybe we should form up the umbrella to help us keep all this running? Where do they start?
Yeah, well, it helps that our group. I mean, the Megagame Coalition. If we didn't have GenCon to focus us, we likely wouldn't exist right now. Like, we would just be one of dozens of very small. Like, we'd be the equivalent of the Megagames International Discord server, which is like fairly dead.
Yep.
So it really helps to have kind of a singular mission to focus you. I guess in terms of advice, like, if you are a small group and you have your own thing, you don't need to give that up in order to join an umbrella group. Like, you can keep doing your own small thing while you help out this broader, initiative.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say advice would be try to, if it's something that you're going to want to repeat, if it's a one-time thing, one event or something, that that's one thing. But if it's something you're going to try to repeat yearly, try to be very conscious about making it sustainable for the people involved. Make it any volunteers or yourselves, like, make sure you're not just killing yourself trying to do it. Think of your physical and mental health as you're doing it, because if it's really, really, really hard, there's a good chance that you won't do it again, or other people won't do it again.
Yeah. No, good advice.
Very important advice.
All right. So last, I suppose, I think we've kind of covered this, but just to put the cap on the end of it, the cherry on top. Riley, starting with you, what are you most proud of personally since you started this bigger gaming journey?
What am I most proud? I mean, probably just the sheer number of designs that I've designed and have been able to run. I am thankful that the majority of them have been either successful or very successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm most proud of. I don't know if that is too self-serving. I would like to say what I'm proud of with this most recent GenCon, which is one, kind of premiering my jungle game, and then also two is designing this one-page mecha game called Pizza Party. I'm very proud of it. I would like to say on the record that this is the first one-page mega game that I've ever observed in the universe. And if you disagree, you can come at me, bro. So
the gauntlet's down. Very good.
Yeah, I'd like to announce my 9/10 of a page mega game coming soon.
Awesome. Good. We'll hold you to that.
Yeah. For me, it's just sort of broad when it comes to the Megagame Coalition. It's very cool to see all these people traveling from all over the country and farther to come do one thing together. That they may not. Some of them come and they don't even know how cool mega games are, and then they show up and they see how cool they are, and they there was one guy, I believe his name was Clay this year, and you could tell he caught the bug. It was his first real exposure to them, and he just at the bar after, he was just going off on all his ideas and what he wants mega games to do, and yeah, it's awesome to see people coming to our events and getting that bug.
it is a really amazing feeling when you see someone that looks familiar and you were like, hey, I know you. And then they're like, yeah, I played in your previous game and it was amazing. So now I'm here.
Yes.
And so that's a really great feeling.
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose we better wrap up. I think we're going to be hearing from the pair of you again soon. Maybe sooner rather than later. We are owed another conversation in 18 months or so, Riley, so we won't be forgetting that. But thank you both. It's really, really sort of interesting insight to the coalition and how it operates and where it came from. Hopefully, I think there is a lot of lot of nuggets of knowledge in there for people interested in getting involved in the space. Where can people? Obviously, we'll have some links to the coalition, but where can people go to learn more about it and yourselves, and get in touch if they've heard this and they're inspired to jump on board?
Yeah, the best thing is probably to join the Megagame Coalition Discord, which I'm sure you will link to. We also have a website and an email if you're feeling old school. If you want to follow kind of my East Coast endeavors, I am operating under the auspices of Philadelphia Megagames. So you can just Google search Philadelphia Megagames. I'm the first hit, I imagine. And all our events are on there, and I would love to have you as a player, as a moderator, as a compatriot. I have made friends in New York City, Richmond, Boston, all of whom are interested in running their own games, and I'm just happy to help. So if you want to do that, I will help you.
Yeah, I'm basically just active on Megagame Coalition right now, so you can find me on that Discord. There's been a little chat here and there about maybe trying to run Mega Games in Minnesota or the nearby area.
Yes, do it.
Oh, okay. Minnesota 2025.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's gonna be awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah. And maybe I'll package Deep Haven up one of these days too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. We would love
You
that.
package up Deep Haven and you run a game in Minnesota, and I will come to one of those two things. Maybe.
Maybe.
We will be running Deep Haven as part of our suite of mega games at PAX Unplugged.
Awesome.
In case anyone out there is Dwarven curious.
Good to know. Good to know.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming. This was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.